with a 10mm socket, unbolt these. Let this drain as well. Let's unbolt these lines with a 13mm socket. There we go. Let's get this coolant overflow out of our way. 10mm socket, remove this bolt. Lift this up, slide it out of the cowl, and just flip it to the side over here. Next, unplug the mass airflow sensor connector. Right over there, you'll see a hose clamp. We'll have to remove that with either an 8mm or a flathead screwdriver. Loosen up this clamp. And at the front right here, you'll see two 10mm bolts that hold on this air intake. Remove both. Pull up on this and slide it out of the air intake over here. There we go, set this aside. Let's remove this harness for the mass airflow sensor off of the shroud. Set that aside. Pop this one off too. Follow it along to the driver's side. Remove it off of here as well. And thankfully there's a lot of slack in this harness. Looks like it has some extra wires here. But just push this to the side like this. I'm going to use a bungee cord to support it out of my way. Pull this hose out of the shroud. Let's remove the rest of this intake duct from over there on the throttle body. Use a flathead screwdriver and loosen up this clamp. Then we'll pull this right off. That'll just make some extra space here. That way we can pull the radiator fan shroud out of the way. Slide this off. Set that aside. Push this AC hose off of the shroud. Straight back like that. Let's unclip the radiator hose. Use a trim tool and pop it up. Push this out of the way. Now if you follow the filler tube and the dipstick tubes, there are a couple bolts here that we have to take out. The first one being this one right here for the oil dipstick tube, 10mm socket. Take that out. Now this can move around a little bit. Try not to bend it too much out of the way. The next one that we have to remove is that nut over there. So it holds the transmission dipstick tube in. Drop a 10mm socket on there and then try to break it free. One last one to be removed is that 13mm bolt down there on that bracket, and that holds the oil filler tube. I'm going to stick my socket with an extension down in here. It's a 13mm socket, and I'm going to try and remove this one. Get that bolt out. Now we can move all of these around as we need, and now hopefully we can get the fan shroud out. The radiator fan shroud is held on by these two 10mm bolts here, and then there are some that go straight down, two on each side. I'll show you those in a second. For now, let's get these two off. And the bolts I'm talking about, there are actually three on each side. My passenger side only has two, but there's one at the back there, one in the middle, and one right at the front here. They're all 10mm bolts, so with a long extension, I'll get those. And on this side, like I said, I have one missing, but there's still one at the front. So let's take all of them out. It's gonna be really hard to show you, but I'll try my best. Take out these three bolts on the driver's side. Do the same to the passenger side. Now you can take this fan shroud, pop it back and off of the radiator. Now we just have to fish it out of here. Push the dipstick tubes out of your way. Get it past this radiator hose. Slide it up and out. There we go. Now at the top of the radiator on the driver's side, you'll see this black plastic cover here. Go ahead and pop that off with a screwdriver, pry bar, or even your fingers if you can. And then it'll be best if you use two picks, or you can also take a pick and pry it up like that until it's removed. Just make sure it doesn't go flying. There we go. Okay, fell in my hand. I'm gonna remove it. And now watch out because fluid's gonna come out. But at this point, you can go ahead and remove the line. And follow the radiator down and do the same to the lower line. Before I do that though, I'm gonna go ahead and put this clip back in so that we can reattach the new line when the time comes. Now back underneath, we can grab these oil cooler lines and just pull them down this way. There we go. And here they are. There you have it. Grab the new lines, and I want to leave these plastic caps on both ends until I'm ready to connect them. That way any debris doesn't get into the line. Make sure you follow the same path as the old lines. That way nothing gets in the way or nothing gets pinched. I'll show you in a second where it has to go. Let's go back up by the radiator and connect them there first. Now from the top you can see the oil cooler lines right here. You have to make sure that they go on the other side of the steering shaft, so underneath the steering shaft, not over, because over they don't really have much room. So you can see I brought them, so it's hard to see, but there they are, right there, going right underneath the steering shaft. And they might be a little close right now, but once everything gets positioned into place, they'll be far enough away to clear everything. So at this point, let's connect them to the top and the bottom fittings on the radiator. I'm going to start with the top one. Go ahead and remove this plastic cap, and all you have to do is just press it in. As long as your locking clip is inserted properly, just go ahead and press it in. There we go. That's locked in. Follow the line down. You should see one of these little caps hanging out somewhere on the line that you're going to have to press over like this. That's going to lock the clip in so that the clip can't unlock to unlock the line, if you know what I mean. At this point, do the same to the bottom, then we'll go back underneath and connect the rest of the line. Let's get the fan shroud back in, push the dipsticks out of the way. Pay attention to your radiator fins to make sure you don't damage them as you install the fan shroud. All the hoses and wires and cables and everything that's supposed to be out of the way, just get it out of the way. Now with the fan shroud in place, I'm actually not going to bolt it up to the top yet. Make sure these rubber pieces on the top lock into the radiator. That's what's going to hold it tight. And then I'm actually going to start in the bolts that connect the two halves first. There's 3 of them, if you remember correctly. There are 6 of them, 3 on each side. Kind of hard to see. Start them all on by hand. You don't want them to cross thread by accident. And now I'm going to just snug them up. 10mm socket. Yeah, let's do the same to the other side. All 6 are tight. Put this AC line right back where it belongs. Make sure it's out of the way of everything. Reconnect or resecure the upper radiator hose. Before we go too far, let's put this in. Make sure it's seated all the way down. Let's snug up the hose clamp. I'm using an 8mm socket. You can use that or a flathead, whatever you prefer. Just make sure it's nice and snug, but don't over tighten it. Those usually strip out and you have to replace them if you over tighten them. Before we move any further, let's resecure the fan shroud and therefore also the radiator. These 2 10mm bolts, or one right here and one right here. Snug these up. Resecure any wires. Now take your air intake and let's line it up. Make sure it slides in over here and it makes a nice tight connection. Once it's in, snug up the hose clamp so that it can be secured. At the front here, there were 2 mounting bolts. Line those up and start them in. Go ahead and plug in the mass airflow sensor connector. Make sure it clicks so it's nice and secure. Let's bolt it down. This one's not going to be easy. Let's bolt this down here. All right, let's snug it up with a 13mm socket. There we go. That's nice and snug. Up here, let's put a little 10mm nut on. Snug this up. Over here, let's reattach the dipstick tube. Another little 10mm bolt. Make sure this is nice and snug. Take the coolant overflow, slide it into the 2 slots up there, push it all the way back, set it down, and I'm just going to go ahead and start in the bolt. That way it stays in place here. Snug up the overflow bolt. Now I want to connect the lines here by the oil filter first, and I'll show you in a minute why. But basically, take off the plastic cover that holds your new bolts and brand new gasket. Line this up, start in the 2 bolts. Let's snug them. Now I'm just going to grab a small 1/4" ratchet and make sure that these are nice and snug once they're bottomed out. I'm going about 1/4 of a turn at most. So the reason I did this first is because this bracket here is what attaches the lines to the block. And as you can see, this can be slid wherever it needs to line up with the bolt hole. And the bolt hole is right about here. So if you line up both ends first, on the radiator and on the engine block side, then this bracket can be the last thing that you do to reattach these lines. Now with this bracket lined up, I'm going to go ahead and put this bolt through. And with a 13mm, just going to go ahead and snug this up. There we go. Let's fill the engine up with oil, remove your oil fill cap, and as you can see, you need to use 5W30. I'm going to cap this off and check it on the dipstick, although it's not going to be completely accurate, but I want to get a baseline to make sure that it is somewhere between the low and the high marks. All right, so this is actually perfect. Not sure how well you can see it, but these dots, and on this side you have some hash marks, is this is the low line, this is the high line, and basically our oil is right above the high, which is okay because we haven't started the engine yet. So once we start it, it's probably going to go down. So I'm going to leave it exactly where it is. Stick this back in.